Don't forget to like and subscribe to follow good stories. In the carriage, the father kept grumbling because his daughter wasn't wearing the violet dress. "I've told you already," he said. "We're going there to seek financial support, so there's no need for bright clothes." The father sighed. "Oh, Madelyn, my daughter, how can you be so foolish at times? This time, it's not Lord Nottingham who invited us, but his eldest son." Madelyn, slightly irritated, replied, "Why did we even accept an invitation from a family we've never met before, father? Don't expect too much. The Nottinghams are a wealthy and famous family. No one there would be interested in the daughter of a bankrupt baron. I bet Lord Nottingham didn't even write that letter himself." Her father's mood dampened by her words. "Whether or not he did, you don't need to say it like that. He sent this letter, fully aware of our circumstances. We must accept this kindness, regardless of what he intends." Madelyn turned cold, thinking, that arrogant man would never propose to me. "I'm sure he's just fulfilling his duty. It must be." At the entrance of Nottingham Manor, the butler and maids respectfully welcomed the two guests. Madelyn recognized Sebastian and couldn't believe she was seeing these people under such circumstances. When Sebastian noticed her staring blankly, he asked, "Is something wrong, my lady?" Madelyn, flustered, stammered, "No, nothing at all," slightly surprised by how mature and dignified he seemed despite his youth. Suddenly, footsteps approached from ahead. The Earl and Countess of Nottingham, along with their eldest son, Ian Nottingham, came out to greet the guests. "We've been eagerly awaiting your arrival," said the Earl. "This is my wife, Catherine, and my eldest son, Ian." Baron Renfield bowed respectfully to their hosts, and Madelyn followed suit with a gentle greeting. In her previous life, she had never met the Earl and Countess, as her husband had fallen ill and passed away before the war. The Countess had died later, after witnessing the tragic deaths of her children. In those portraits, the Earl appeared cold, but in reality, he looked cheerful, though somewhat frail. The Nottingham estate, too, had once been like this, lively and full of energy. As she glanced around, Madelyn couldn't help but reflect on the many years she had spent here in her past life. Suddenly, a hand extended toward her. "Shall we go inside, my lady?" Ian asked. Though hesitant, she took his warm hand. "Thank you, Lord Nottingham," she said, pushing aside her earlier worries. Despite her concerns, she and her father spent peaceful days at Nottingham Manor, a place completely different from what she remembered. Everyone here was full of life and vitality, a stark contrast to the estate she had once known. This difference made her see Ian in a new light. If the tragedies hadn't struck this place before she arrived, perhaps their lives would have been different. If I had come here before everything happened, maybe he and I would have. After a pleasant dinner, the Earl invited them to tea and asked if the meal had suited their tastes. But Madelyn hadn't forgotten the true purpose of this meeting. She had to bring up her family's financial situation. Before she could say anything, Lord Nottingham cheerfully announced, "I'm so glad to have met you, my lady. Now, let's leave some space for the two of you, shall we?" All three adults stood up simultaneously. Confused, Madelyn glanced at her father, who whispered, "Be good now." The door closed behind them, leaving her standing in bewilderment. She quickly rose, but Ian spoke before she could. "You don't need to stand, my lady. I'll be the one to do that." With that, Ian knelt on one knee before her, gazing at her with deep admiration. "Lady Madelyn, will you marry me?" Madelyn was utterly shocked. Could it be? She had never imagined that the proud Ian would actually propose to her. "What are you doing?" she stammered. Ian, calmly, "You might be surprised by this, so I'll get straight to the point. I've heard that your family is bankrupt." Madelyn exclaimed. "What does that have to do with anything?" Ian, perplexed, responded, "I'm talking about what I can offer you. I've already spoken to my parents, so there's no need to worry." He opened a ring box, presenting it along with his sincere proposal. "Lady Madelyn Renfield, it would be an honor for me to take you as my wife. You've seen how old my father is. I want him to witness this before it's too late." Madelyn clenched her fists in anger. "Witness what? Our marriage?" "Yes," Ian replied. Madelyn laughed mockingly. "Do you really love me?" Ian froze for a moment. "What?" "I asked if you truly love me." "Love?" Ian stood up silently and responded, "Rather than relying on something as fickle as love, I'd say you're fascinating. Or perhaps I like you. You behave like an eccentric philosopher, always discussing unrealistic ideas. And I regret having to say this, but you're more responsible than your father. Didn't you once say you wanted to live without depending on anyone? But the truth is, you need me to handle everything, Ian added. Moreover, I want a wise lady of the house, not a fool like so many others. But the truth is, you need me to bear the burden. Moreover, I want a wise lady of the house, not a fool like so many other girls out there. Don't miss this opportunity. Accept this marriage. Ian's every word pierced Madelyn's heart. As always, he only wants to buy my affection, she thought. Ian tried to explain. I've never. Madelyn interrupted by calling him by name. Ian, I didn't come here today to agree to your proposal. Ian quickly grabbed her hand, his face showing clear signs of distress. You just need time to think, right? At that, Madelyn's anger reached its peak. She yanked her hand away from Ian. I don't want to be sold off to a man just because of my father's debt. I don't want to make the same mistakes again. Ian was baffled. Mistakes? What on earth are you talking about? This marriage benefits you as well. I didn't mean to insult you. Madelyn sighed and rejected him. Lord Nottingham, you and I can never be together. Ian, unwilling to give up, pressed her. At least explain to me why. I feel like a fool here. Madelyn replied, because we would only bring each other misery. Ian held his head in frustration, his eyes showing a mix of confusion and distress. He silently left, like a man who had just been insulted by someone beneath him. Madelyn tightly closed her eyes as the door shut behind her. I shouldn't have come here in the first place, she thought. Even though Ian hadn't done anything wrong, she still wished there would be no connection between them. In her previous life, when Madelyn was 26 years old, she had been in deep despair and anxiety over the disappearance of her dog, Sai. It had poured rain all night, and she had no idea what would happen to him. Suddenly, there was a knock at the front door. Madam? Her eyes lit up when, right in front of her, stood Sai, safe and sound. The butler had brought him back. Knowing how worried she had been, Sai immediately ran to her, enthusiastically nuzzling his owner. Sebastian cleared his throat and explained that it had been the gardener who found him earlier that morning. Although Sai was drenched, he was fortunately unharmed. Madelyn wanted to personally thank the gardener, but the butler's awkward demeanor puzzled her. Sebastian smiled subtly and said, Lord Nottingham is quite exhausted from catching a cold. A cold? Madelyn asked, now sensing something strange. How sudden is that? Is it serious? Sebastian continued. The doctor has prescribed him medicine and advised rest, my lady. So, please refrain from going upstairs. Outside, the rain continued to beat down against the windows, creating a rhythmic tapping sound. But it couldn't drown out the doubts rising in Madelyn's heart. It's just a coincidence, right? She wondered. Why did he fall ill today of all days? She took a deep breath to calm herself and resolutely opened the door to his room. I'm only here to check if he's all right, she reminded herself. Suddenly, Madelyn noticed Ian's overcoat hanging on the rack, completely drenched. Her heart raced in panic. Could it be? Ian had braved the storm to search for Corey? Looking at the man lying on the sickbed, breathless, she could hardly believe her eyes. She approached and gently touched Ian's forehead, gasping, oh no, his fever is so high. At that moment, Ian was drifting in and out of consciousness. His vision blurred, but he vaguely saw a figure leaving the room. Isabel, he murmured, reaching out and grabbing Madelyn's hand, calling his sister's name. Tears streamed down Ian's face as he cried out in regret. Isabel, I'm so sorry. I should have let you choose your own path. Please forgive me. It's all my fault. My selfishness caused you so much pain. Madelyn tried to comfort him. Calm down. I'm your wife, not Isabel. Confused, Ian stammered. Wife? My wife? Madelyn hesitated for a moment. Yes, it's me. Madelyn Nottingham, your wife. Madelyn, my wife? Ian whispered, his fingers intertwining with hers. Madelyn, my wife. The words sounded so sweet and full of affection. Madelyn's cheeks flushed pink. She had never heard him speak her name so tenderly. She glanced at the rose he had secretly plucked and placed in her room. The soft sunlight after the rain gently bathed the crimson petals, their bright color reflecting the small flicker of joy that warmed her heart at this moment. Boom! Suddenly, the scene shifted violently to a battlefield, filled with the deafening sound of bombs and gunfire. The once vivid landscape turned pitch black, draped in death and destruction. Retreat! Fall back, everyone! Move quickly! Lieutenant Nottingham shouted. Our men are severely wounded, sir. The enemy is closing in on us. the soldier warned. My leg. No, no. I don't want to die. Another soldier cried out. Lieutenant, please save us. A voice pleaded, followed by a sharp whistle. Lieutenant, watch out. Bang. A loud explosion snapped Ian awake from his nightmare, gasping for breath as he stared at the chandelier hanging from the ceiling. Every night, he was haunted by the same dream, reliving the horrors of the battlefield. But this time, he realized his left hand was being held tightly. Once he collected himself, Ian noticed her Madelyn sleeping by his bedside. Why is she here in my room? He wondered. Has she been taking care of me? He felt the warmth of her gentle hand holding his inside in relief. No matter what happens, I feel better already. Her hand has pulled me out of my nightmares, banishing the memories of war. We only married out of necessity, Ian thought bitterly. A grieving widow for a broken Earl, shattered by war. I, a man scarred by battle, and she, a young noblewoman, still untouched by the horrors of war. We are from two entirely different worlds. Sebastian, Ian called. Yes, my lord, Sebastian responded. Does she feel less lonely now that I've given her a dog? Sebastian paused. No, my lord. She didn't need a dog to comfort her. She found her way into your world and pulled you back into hers. Ian stared at his hand clasped in hers. But do I even deserve to be with her? I've committed to many sins. I'll probably end up dragging her into the same hell I'm living in. Still lost in thought, Madelyn suddenly stirred. Oh, you're awake, she exclaimed, as she instinctively pulled her hand away. You had such a high fever. Ian responded flatly. I'm fine. The atmosphere between them grew awkward. What about Corey? That troublesome little boy? Ian asked. He's fine now, she answered. Good, I see, Ian murmured. Madelyn, the other day you mentioned wanting to see a movie, didn't you? Madelyn hesitated. Yes, but why are you asking now? Ian replied. Well, from now on, you can leave the estate whenever you wish. I won't stop you anymore. Madelyn, suspicious, asked. Are you trying to make me feel grateful, Ian? Ian averted his gaze. I'm only concerned for your safety. The world isn't safe, but from now on, you can attend any party or event you like. Madelyn was puzzled by his sudden change of heart. First, he went out in the rain to find Corey for me, and now he's telling me I can go watch a movie? Has the world suddenly become safer, Ian? Madelyn asked softly. Ian gripped the sheets tightly. No, I just don't want you getting caught up in my mess, he admitted. Madelyn's heart ached. Your mess? She questioned, her voice full of concern. Don't tell me. Ian quickly cut her off, avoiding further conversation. He commanded her to call the butler. Madelyn hesitated. Ian, you can pick as many flowers as you like. The garden is yours after all. Ian froze. She knows, but maybe it was all right after all. Maybe, just maybe, this was a small glimmer of hope for their relationship. Perhaps this is my last chance, she thought to herself. For the next few days, Madelyn continued to care for Ian until his fever finally subsided. Ian seemed friendlier toward her since that night. If it had been before, he probably wouldn't have even acknowledged her. One day, as she wandered into his study, she noticed an interesting book. It was an original copy of the play Taming the Great. If you like it, you can keep it, Ian offered. Madelyn's cheeks flushed pink. You mean I can keep it? Ian glanced at her as though she were some strange creature. This made Madelyn feel guilty. Oh no, even though he's been kinder to me, I shouldn't have said that, she thought, hurriedly correcting herself. I mean, we're married now. What's yours is mine, right? But I suppose you wouldn't want that. Ian cut her off. It's yours. Everything here is yours. Just like the rose garden is mine. This library belongs to you. Madelyn's heart began to flutter as she secretly glanced at her husband. He was giving instructions to the butler about fortifying the estate. It seemed Ian was preparing defenses in case war broke out again. Madelyn wondered, when will he ever let go of his memories of the war? Perhaps that was the only thing that weighed heavily on his mind. She hoped this phase would pass soon. She glanced at the book in her hands. This is an original copy of an old play, so this is what he enjoys. Suddenly, an idea sparked in her mind. A few days later, Nottingham Manor bustled with activity as servants cleaned and decorated the estate. Madelyn had decided to host a movie screening for everyone. The servants were excited about the event, but the butler Sebastian seemed rather concerned for his mistress. Sebastian, Madelyn said, This estate needs something new. I know I'm not the best at preparing things, but I want Ian to see that the world is recovering. If he can let go of his memories of the war, do you think everything this estate and Ian himself will change too? She lowered her gaze and silently hoped that not only he would change, but that she too would. Sebastian, seeing how happy his mistress seemed, was momentarily stunned. He bowed respectfully and apologized for not realizing her thoughtful intentions sooner, and promised to help her prepare everything. Just as their conversation ended, someone called out, "Mr. Sebastian, where should I put this?" The butler sighed as he saw what it was: a tiger's head, stuffed after some hunting trip. "No, we won't be displaying that," he replied with a hint of frustration. "Just put it in my room." Suddenly, Madelyn saw the figure of her husband walking on the upper floor. "I hope this will be a good idea," she thought. Preparations continued. The screen, projector, food, and decorations in the chapel were set. Everyone was excited, including Madelyn. But as for her husband Ian, he seemed completely indifferent to the events unfolding around him. Yet Madelyn knew Ian was simply letting her do what she wanted by pretending not to care. But she had to test this theory. She knocked on the door, and soon heard his voice. "Come in." Madelyn peeked in and asked, "Are you still busy?" Ian replied nonchalantly, "I'm just relaxing in a different way." He glanced up at her, noticing that she seemed unusually quiet. "I'm just a little nervous," Madelyn admitted. "It's the first time we're hosting guests. I hope I haven't made any mistakes. I sent out the invitations, but it was hard to reach some of them. This is my first event as the Countess, and I want everything to be perfect." Ian spoke softly. "It seems like you're doing just fine." Madelyn blushed slightly and widened her eyes. "I was planning to start the movie after tea. Have you ever watched a film before?" Ian responded, "Only once, at a theater in Paris." She touched his shoulder gently, then suggested, "Let's watch it together. It'll be fun." Ian stared at her, momentarily dazed by her gesture. Madelyn, flustered, quickly excused herself. "I'll let you rest." As soon as the door closed behind her, Ian's face flushed bright red, all the way to his ears. Meanwhile, Madelyn covered her burning face with her hands, equally embarrassed. "I said it to him. I really said it." Her heart was racing, pounding like a drum, and her hand, where it had touched him, was hot and tingling. The next day, their party was held. Thankfully, many guests attended. The differences between the commoners and nobility were now less noticeable, as everyone was dressed in their own unique style. Most guests were curious about the supposed haunted reputation of the estate. It was difficult for Ian to endure the prying stares of the guests. What if he doesn't show up for the film screening? Madelyn wondered nervously. Suddenly, a voice rang out from the upper floor. "I apologize for arriving late." The man came down the stairs, leaning on a cane. "I am Ian Nottingham, the master of this estate. I sincerely thank you all for attending this event." The crowd below murmured, but Ian maintained his calm composure. "I hope you all enjoy yourselves." Madelyn couldn't hide her surprise and happiness. "I'm sorry you were delayed," she said gently. Ian responded, "No need to apologize. We're just about to start the film, right?" "Yes, we are," Madelyn replied, smiling. "Then, let's watch it together," Ian said as he offered his arm for her to hold. Though feeling slightly embarrassed, Madelyn hesitated only for a moment before slipping her hand through his strong arm. As they walked, she suddenly noticed Ian trembling slightly, trying hard to steady himself in front of the crowd. "Are you all right?" she asked quietly. "You don't have to force yourself," Ian reassured her. "I'm fine. Handling these guests isn't easy for you either. But I know you're worried about me." Madelyn smiled warmly. "Of course I'm worried about you," Ian softly replied. "I'm all right. Besides, I want to watch the movie." Madelyn's face lit up with a radiant smile. "You want to watch it with me, don't you?" Ian didn't respond verbally, but the redness of his ears spoke volumes. As the projector started whirring and the first images of the film flickered on the screen, Ian whispered, "What movie is this?" Madelyn, still smiling, replied, "I'm not sure either. It's the latest work from a famous director. They say it's a comedy, so I thought you'd enjoy watching it with me." Ian cleared his throat, trying to mask his embarrassment. "Thank you for doing all of this." Madelyn's smile deepened with happiness. Within minutes, the entire room was filled with laughter at the film's humor. Even Madelyn found herself laughing heartily at the scenes unfolding on screen. She snuck a glance at Ian, noticing a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He's focused, she thought fondly. But suddenly, Ian shuddered as the movie shifted to a scene where cannons were being prepared for battle. Madelyn, thinking about thanking him for coming, didn't immediately notice the change in Ian's demeanor. However, she soon realized that his whole body was trembling. The booming of the cannons in the film grew louder and louder. Ian clutched his chest in agony, the pain overwhelming him. His walking cane clattered to the floor. The cannons on screen fired again, and with a deafening roar, a flash of fire blazed across the screen. Madelyn, sensing something was wrong, turned just in time to see Ian writhing in pain beside her. "Ian," she screamed, as he seemed to be having a seizure. Panic spread through the room as everyone murmured and gasped, unsure of what was happening. "Someone, please, help us," Madelyn cried out, her voice shaking. "Ian, please someone." The room was suddenly flooded with light as a man rushed forward. "Stay calm, my lady. I'm a doctor," he reassured her. "The Earl's symptoms are a form of epilepsy. We need to stabilize him." The man barked orders to the servants. "Take him back to his room immediately. He could bite his tongue, so place a cloth in his mouth." Madelyn, desperate and tearful, called after him. "Excuse me, you said you're a doctor?" The man nodded. "Yes. I'm a neurologist and I served in the medical corps during the war. My name is Colonel Arlington, the eldest son of the Arlington family." Through teary eyes, Madelyn managed to thank him, her voice barely steady. "I'm so grateful for what you've done. Thank you." At that moment, Madelyn felt immense relief at Dr. Arlington's presence, never imagining how deeply his arrival would later connect to her own fate. As she drifted in and out of consciousness, Madelyn was pulled back to the reality of June 28, 1914, the day war broke out once again. So there are still many things in the past that have not been exposed. Is Ian Nottingham really such a bad person? And why did the two of them end up like that in their previous life? Please like and subscribe to watch the next episode.